Hello, everybody. Take a moment to introduce yourselves in chat. We'd love to know where you are from in the world and what organization you're with. Maybe we can just go around quickly and introduce everybody who is on our panel today. Who wants to start?
We'll start.
Yay!
My name is Mandy Pierce. I'm the owner of Funding for Good. We're located in Hickory, North Carolina, and we work around the country with nonprofits.
I'm Marie Palacios. I'm Mandy's business partner, and I like to focus on all things strategic planning, board development, grant writing, so we kind of balance each other out.
Thank you. Amy, will you go next?
Yes. Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Eisenstein. I am here in North Central New Jersey, just outside of New York. And I have two companies, Amy Eisenstein LLC. I help organizations with major gifts and board development, and also the Capital Campaign Toolkit if you're looking for an alternative way to run your capital campaign. I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. Sean.
Sean Kosofsky. I use the moniker The Nonprofit Fixer, but I own the company Mind the Gap Consulting. I've lived in San Francisco, but I've lived all over the country, Detroit, North Carolina, New York. Mostly I help organizations with executive director and board development, but on the fundraising side, I love that. Been doing that my whole life. And I specifically right now am really focused on helping organizations navigate Facebook fundraisers so that they can pull as much money out of these platforms as possible while people are feeling generous and wanting to help out. So if you have any questions around Facebook fundraisers in particular or digital, I might be able to be helpful.
Awesome. Mazarine.
Hi, I'm Mazarine Trays of Wildwoman Fundraising, and I'm so happy to be here with everybody. So nice to see your faces and to be chatting with you. I've done a lot of things in the nonprofit world, a lot of fundraising stuff, but right now what I'm helping people do primarily is work on their COVID-19 messaging. And so that's what some of my resources will be about, and I'll post them in the group, and I'm so excited. Thank you again.
Hey, Naira.
Hi everyone, my name is Naira. I am originally from Colombia, but I've lived in different countries and I've worked for different international organizations and in communications, in the communications field. So now I'm a communication and diversity consultant, and I'm here to help you all with messaging in creative ways and using like all the technological tools we have now, like all the social media, to really get your message out there and like reach diverse audiences.
Thank you. Sandy.
Hey everybody, I'm Sandy Ries, Chief Encouragement Officer at Get Fully Funded. We help new, young, and small nonprofits learn how to raise money to fund their operations. And lately, I've been helping a lot of groups get really scrappy and figure out what they have to work with and how to pivot and do things when they can't do in-person events. We're doing virtual events, we're adjusting messaging, and folks are raising a lot of money. I'm really excited to be here to be able to throw some ideas your way.
Fantastic. Beverly.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bev Browning, author of Grant Writing for Dummies, and I have two organizations, Bev Browning LLC. That is the consulting arm, and I work with strategic planning for nonprofits, compression planning, board development training, board member orientation, and I also do one-on-one counseling with executive directors who are burned out and don't know which way to turn. And I really help them at multiple levels based on their area of need and where they're struggling. I'm excited to just get people off of the stress balance and move them back into more positive thinking and understanding that nothing lasts forever, and that as nonprofits, we're going to get through this. I also have a private operating foundation, the Grant Writing Training Foundation, and that is the umbrella for all of my international and national training activities.
Thank you, Beverly. Beth.
Hi, I am Beth Brodowski. I am president of Iris Creative Group. I'm the token marketer here. So I am somebody that comes to nonprofit work via design and marketing and branding. I'd worked in a nonprofit before I started my company 23 years ago. And so we actually normally do a lot of brand strategy. Everything that we do comes from the perspective of really getting to know and getting clear on your audience. We like to say that we help the right people show up, stick around, and give back. And moving people using marketing through those transitions is a lot of what we do on a normal basis. A lot of our work is often directed towards designing, branding, and marketing for events. So that's really been switching up right now. Lately, we've been doing a lot of giving days and how to deepen like a custom giving day for somebody. And what people are starting to do is trying to figure out how to turn their in-person events into virtual events. So we've been working with people on a lot of the, branding and execution around that. We also run a program called Nonprofit Toolkit, which is a masterclass program where we teach online education programs. A lot of the people that we find work in nonprofits and especially in nonprofit marketing. I always joke that if you want to be like the theater majors become really great nonprofit marketers at some point. And so we get a lot of people who we lovingly call slash marketers who didn't really plan on doing this and somehow made one change on the website and somebody says, great, now you're our development director / communication director. And so we train a lot of them. We've been doing a lot of that. And what we've seen during this transition happening is we've actually started to teach people what our process is. Instead of just teaching them marketing classes through online webinars, we've started to pick apart the way that we do our online paid programming and teach people those processes. And that seems to be helpful.
Fantastic. Thank you, Beth. Gloria, who's with us in picture and hopefully sound. Are you able to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure.
Go for it.
Hi everyone. Gloria Namugaya, and I'm in Boston, and my experience is working with underserved communities, mostly immigrant and refugee communities, and currently I've been helping with fundraising with community grassroots nonprofits in the Boston area.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, welcome everybody. This is just a sampling of the amazing group. I think we're ended up at 15 nonprofit experts to help in the Show Up and Fundraise Challenge. I'm Sarah Olivieri. I'm a #1 international best-selling author, former executive director like some other folks here, and I'm the owner of PivotGround and creator of the Impact Method. I typically am not wearing my fundraising hat. What I love to do is help nonprofits change the way they operate so that they can really make a huge impact while skipping the overwhelm and burnout that so many people suffer from. And it's really my pleasure to bring you the Show Up and Fundraise Challenge, because what I started to see was many nonprofits afraid to fundraise, and yet they're being impacted very negatively financially by the COVID pandemic. And I want as many nonprofits as possible to survive. And one thing that I know about this kind of situation is you have to take action and you have to do it now. So I wanted to put this together so that if you're feeling scared or nervous, you don't need to be. You can do it because you have all of us and more who aren't on this call today here to help you and hold your hand and push you along so you can actually get your fundraising messages out the door. I'd love to ask a few questions of our panel, and if you have a question, by all means, put it in the chat. But I'd love anybody who wants to share, what are a few things that you have seen happen since this pandemic started, and of those things, like what of them has driven you to be in this challenge and make a difference for everybody who registers? Sean.
I'll just jump in real quick and just say that I've had a number of clients and a number of people say that they're just, as you mentioned, sort of like afraid to fundraise right now. And I think that this comes down to this idea of not being the buyer and the seller. People are like, oh, I feel like it's tone deaf to fundraise right now because my cause isn't for starving people, or it isn't for people directly on the front lines of this pandemic. So some folks are actually starting to diminish the importance of their own work because it isn't life-saving. Therefore, they worry that it's going to be tone deaf, or they think it's insensitive to be fundraising right now. So one thing I just have noticing is that folks are feeling like they are supposed to pull back on fundraising, and they're looking for some validation to do that. Mostly executive directors, not development people. It's mostly been the EDs, I think, are more worried, or board members about this. And so that's one thing, but I really believe that unlike other crises, people can't just get in their car and drive down and help people in need in this situation. They are looking for some way to connect. Many people are still employed, they're still doing okay, and they want to help out some way. And we're leaving a huge number of people with goodwill on the table right now by not fundraising. So I think it's really important that people lean in, not get scared, don't recoil, like lean in.
I think I agree with that, Sean, 100%. And some of the statistics that we've seen are showing that individual donors are actually, I think it was something like 56% I saw yesterday, they're going to increase their giving. And then another portion are going to continue giving at the same level. It's a very, very small number of donors that are actually already saying we're going to give less. And I think people don't realize that yet. And I know many foundations haven't made decisions about what's going to happen next year. But many foundations are even giving above and beyond what they normally give right now, and are planning to give more as the year progresses. So I think it's our job to kind of like help support people and encourage them, and know like you need to have a good message, but you still need to send that message out and make an ask.
Yeah, would anyone else like to jump in?
Yes. What I've noticed in with the organizations that I've been helping with, it's been the lack of access to translated materials, and having not being able to know how to structure the kind of language or the ask, so that people who don't speak the language can really see the message that's being put out by CDC and the different states and communities.
Yeah, such a great point. I'd love to know in the chat if anybody who's on this call today is dealing with multilingual issues. And is anybody else in our panelists here, do you have any clients or nonprofits who are dealing with that? Yeah, Mazarine, do you want to? Yep. Yeah, I love that you brought that up. Do you want to talk about that, Mazarine?
Yeah. I was talking with a friend of mine last week. She comes from the Russian community, and our state is doing a terrible job of reaching out to people who speak Spanish primarily, people who speak Russian primarily. And part of it is because of a lack of diversity at the state level. And so people are dying because we don't have the right information out there in the right channels. That's why I'm so happy Naira is on today, because a lot of communities use a lot of different apps to communicate with each other primarily. They're not watching the TV, and we need to be thinking about all the different channels we need to use to reach all the people that we can.
Yeah, I think closed captioning too, right, is not just for people who are hard of hearing, but also makes a huge difference for people who, if English is not their first language, to be able to read the closed captioning or put that into a translator can make a huge difference. And that's so important. And I think that's one of the things people, start rushing, and they, you get very closed in your mind, and you start to throw out, what other people are going through. You don't have space in your head maybe for that, but it's important if you're serving people to have that space. Naira, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, like Mazarine was saying, I think that especially with the organizations I'm in contact with more like the Spanish-speaking community and across Latin America, it's been very important to be able to receive information, like immediate information. So like, I don't know, through WhatsApp or through like Instagram, things like this that you don't normally think that are like a way to share valuable information. But I think that given like how immediate everything is happening, like these types of tools are becoming really important, and it would be good to like use them in a way that, you know, can be directed to either finding donors or sharing valuable information to reach different communities.
Yeah, great. Mandy, did you have a?
Yeah. I handle all of our bilingual Spanish-speaking clients and work with missions across.
Can you
the world.
speak up just a little bit or get a little closer to the mic?
I said,
There you
I
go.
handle all of our Spanish-speaking clients and things like that. And we're seeing two different things. Either people are reaching out because they need the translation interpretation skills, but even the English version of the document does not take into consideration the cultural differences and the way things are perceived. So I'm being asked to translate things that sound right in English, but if I actually write it as written and do my job as a translator, it will come across the right way. So I'm finding that I'm having to advocate more and step away from just translator, interpreter, and serve more as an advocate, especially for those who are working in international missions and even some of our local businesses who are using me as a translator for their COVID-19 responses.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think for those of you, if you are going, oh my God, I forgot to think about all this stuff and now I'm scared again to do it, don't worry. We have such talented people in the Facebook group, in the challenge, who are going to be able to help you think about how your message is being translated culturally or linguistically to reach the people that it needs to reach. Awesome. So would anybody else like to share something that they're seeing related to fundraising right now and the needs of nonprofits, or something that motivated you to join the challenge? Amy or Beverly? Go ahead, Amy, and then we'll do Beverly.
Sure. I just want to, offer some words of encouragement. And the reality is that all the organizations that I'm working with and seeing who are following their plan, communicating with donors, actively fundraising, sending requests, picking up the phone and asking for support and for help, are doing better than they did last year in March, in the year before in March, and in April. And so people are being generous. They're rising to the occasion and the challenge. They do want to help. And the reality is that people who can help will and want to. And so I don't want you to listen to that one loud board member who thinks you shouldn't be fundraising, or maybe it's your executive director who thinks that it's coming off as insensitive to be asking for support. But as long as you're acknowledging that we're in this crisis, that things are unstable, but that you still, if your donors believed in your programs and services in January and February, your programs and services are just as important today as they were, and those donors still care about your causes, whether you're on the front lines, whether you're feeding people, whether you're in healthcare. So don't hesitate. If you are not fundraising now, I would go so far as to say you're being negligent and you're harming your organization and you're harming your community and your clients. So this is the perfect time for this challenge. Get out there and fundraise. So, okay, that's what I wanted to add.
Beverly, go ahead.
Yes, I'm seeing smaller nonprofits completely shut down. They're not going after grants anymore. And one, it's because they didn't increase their level of individual giving. They've been around for 15, 20 years, still don't have an endowment fund. And they primarily relied on social enterprises in the community that were revenue producing, because they were located on facilities of public buildings that are now closed in many cities. Their revenue became a dry stream and they didn't have anything to fall back on. They wanted to hold off on grant writing, didn't want to talk to the board about an endowment fund, didn't want to bother people with individual giving. And I'm just trying to support them as much as I can. But there's also this part of me that says, I've been telling you all along that you need to diversify your revenue stream, that you need to have a sustainability plan, that the board needs to be trained about the importance of having a sustainability plan. Because while this might be a once in a lifetime pandemic, we don't know that. And so boards of directors still have a responsibility to bring together the decision-making team members of the leadership team and say, hey, we need a plan. this can happen again. What are we going to do? How are we going to keep the doors open? And how do we continue services to our target population?
Yeah, so well said. Thank you, Beverly. That is so true. So for anybody who's saying, I've got that board member or someone who's the fundraising naysayer, we're recording this call. I wasn't originally going to make it available because I didn't think it would be relevant, but we'll make it available on YouTube and you can send it over to your naysayer because we wouldn't all be in agreement that it's so important to be fundraising right now if that weren't really good thinking. Somebody also like to add in, why is it so important that people fundraise now? Mazarine.
I will happily talk about that. I have heard people tell me, I'm not sure if I can fundraise right now. People on my list, people in my webinars, and I've encouraged them to do so. Before you fundraise, it's important for you to check in with yourself, take a deep breath, understand where you're at emotionally, because if you're putting it off, there might be something else going on with you psychologically. And I'm really glad that Dr. Browning talked about stress, because I feel like it's not just stress. There's hypoarousal and hyperarousal, and we're kind of going in between these states where we don't know how we're going to feel day to day. We're having our inner child come out. I talked to a therapist about this. This is something that you need to be understanding and compassionate with yourself before you start to fundraise, because your donors are feeling the same way. And so are a lot of your staff. All of us are living in a time of very great uncertainty. We don't know what's going to come out of this, quite honestly. But as Dr. Browning rightly put, we've done this before, we can do this again. We had a downturn in 2001. We had a downturn in 2009. We are now having one in 2020. We've lived through this before. This just becomes a greater impact at this moment because of how it's affecting our lives. So whatever you did in 2009, whatever you did in 2001, think back, remember, we will get through this, but we need to fundraise now. We absolutely do. And I have several articles about how to have online donor meetings. I know a nonprofit right now that raised like $250,000 in the last month and a half, and they're a 7-person nonprofit. They've had their best month ever. So they do homelessness services in LA. I know another nonprofit in Chicago that raised $18,000 with a couple of emails and a match, 2 matches, and they do senior services. I know another nonprofit that's a rural nonprofit in the middle of nowhere, Idaho, and they raised $2,500 with 1 email. So no matter what kind of cause you are, now is a good time to fundraise.
Yeah, thank you. Sandy?
Oh, I love that we're talking about like mental health and mindset and some things like that, because I think that really does play in. One of the things that I'm seeing a lot right now in one of the groups that I run is people are just saying, we can't do anything, and they're kind of shut down. And I was reading something the other day that says sometimes when we get really scared, which this is a frightening situation that we're all in, we don't know what's going to happen next. Some states are opening back up and people are uncertain about what's going to happen. But what happens in our little brains when we get afraid, we just shut down. And when we shut down, we can't see options anymore. And so I bet a lot of us are seeing people who just say, well, that won't work. We can't do that. Nobody's going to give to this. People are not going to respond to that. And the truth is, just like we're hearing all these great stories, people are out there giving. And I can match Mazarine with a client that I've been working with for a while that has really started focusing on their donors in the last year or so, and communication ramp up and really valuing the donors, building the relationships. And it's a food pantry, and the crisis hit and the need for emergency food skyrocketed. It went like 10 times. And they said, holy cow, because they're a very small organization. I think they literally have 3 staff and a bunch of volunteers. And they had to change what they were doing immediately. And the scrappy development director grabbed her phone and started doing Facebook Live. What she really was trying to do was say, okay, we're going to change how we're doing food pickup. You can't come in anymore. We're going to do drive-through. So people could drive up in their car, give their name, pop the trunk. A volunteer would put the box in their trunk and they'd wave and they'd drive away. Brilliant, right? And so all their donors start seeing this and they're like, this is great. And the gifts just start flooding in. And we said, isn't that interesting? And so we started to really say, okay, what about this is working? And we did more and more and more of it. And the long story short, every time I talk to them, every few days, like the total amount of giving is just skyrocketing. It's crazy how much money. And I think part of that is because they didn't shut down. They said, well, that's interesting. Look, this is working for us. How can we fan the flames on that? How can we do even more of that? What can we add to this to make it work even better? And I think the organizations who are exploring and getting creative are the ones who are also going to see success. And I completely agree with what Amy said earlier. Those ones that are just sticking to the basics, they're talking to people, they're not just throwing their hands up and saying none of this will work. I think there's a combination of stick to the basics and get creative. And those are the organizations that are not only going to get through this, but are going to come out the other side in great, great shape with lots of new relationships and a much stronger base of donors to move forward with.
Fantastic. Beth, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I will. And I agree that I love that this whole concept of mindset is coming up and that it's so important, because I feel like what Sandy's saying, that like people are having to like move and adapt and do things really quickly. And it's like on the continuum of adaptability, like on one hand, it's like the mad chaos scramble. And on the other hand, it's like, well, I'm like frozen, not able to do anything. And we can easily get ourselves caught up in making decisions out of a fear of loss. And when we're making decisions out of that, like clinging, and like we contract and think smaller, and that's not going to help anybody get out of this. And so if we can kind of work on our mindset to like take a deep breath and look at the possibilities for abundance, I come to this work through creative practice. And so I am a firm believer that constraints are required in order to create creativity, that a blank page is the most terrifying thing in the world to look at. But when other options are cut off and things get narrower, like the narrower things get, the deeper they get. And if you look at that as a positive thing, as an opportunity, as opposed to a limitation, just that little shift in mindset can completely change how you act and how the way you act looks to your community.
Fantastic. I know Mandy's had to run and we're going to have to sign off soon. I just want to thank everybody for coming today, and I hope that you have really heard the message that it is time to be fundraising. And in the challenge, all you have to do is show up. Beth, I love that you brought up constraints. That's one of my favorite secrets to creativity. Whenever I have a creative block, I just throw on a bunch of constraints. And that's in a way what the challenge is about, right? It's going to tell you just specifically what to focus on. You don't have to do, like Sean said in the comments, 20 things. You're just going to do 1 or 2 things a day and push it out the door. And you're gonna have success, because everybody has said it here. This is actually a great time to be fundraising. So can we give everybody a big wave off? We have such nice smiley faces here. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you. Bye.